Welcome to Quality of Life Matters, the official podcast of the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. This is your front row seat to the global well-being conversation. Join hosts Lena Martinez and Roger Fernández-Urbano as they explore cutting-edge research and inspiring ideas that are shaping happiness, well-being, and quality of life.
Welcome to Quality of Life Matters, the ISQOLS podcast, and today we have the honor and the privilege to have Professor Richard Estes. Richard, thank you very much for accepting to come to our podcast.
Thank you very much, Roger, for organizing this and putting it together. I look forward to our conversation.
Me too. So to start with, Richard, what has been the most interesting finding that you ever found doing your research over the last decades?
That really, over the last 50 years.
50 years.
Wow. I would say the commonality of people everywhere in the world. I started my career in clinical practice. I had a psychotherapy practice for 10 years. And I worked with very wealthy clients, very poor clients, people with different kinds of problems. But what I learned then and has reinforced globally is the commonality of people and systems. Mm-hmm. You know, on the surface, they seem different. But it's like going into an ice cream parlor. You have 31 flavors, but they're all ice cream.
They're all ice cream.
So it's the similarities that always impress me. You're my brother as much as my biological brother is my brother. My sisters are the women in my life, professionally and personally. I don't make a distinction.
So at the end, we are not that different from each other.
We're different culturally because of our histories. Mm-hmm. But in terms of our basic needs, basic desires, I think those things we share together. Wow. You with your investment in humanitarianism, and we found out we both are meditators together. Yes. And struggling, to get that free space to clear our mind. This is quite unusual.
Quite unusual. Great, which brings me to the next question, which, by the way, there were so many questions that we wanted to ask you that we wanted to write it down in order that we exactly say what we agreed that we would like to ask you. So the first one was that you spent your career emphasizing that improving quality of life requires a global perspective. And now you were saying, when you look at the world today, what does it mean to think about well-being across nations, cultures, and very different social realities, especially in a world that every time is more polarized? The social media, it's trying to separate us in some senses. What you can say about all this?
My feeling is that every era has presented its own challenges. Mm-hmm. I was born in 1942. In the middle of the Second World War. Oh. So I'm a war baby, came out of that. And then when I graduated high school, I was dealing with Vietnam War. Okay, in this case, the U.S. replacing the French in Cambodia and in Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia. My feeling is that these are patterns and processes that continue over the long term, and that people struggle to find peaceful ways of relating to each other, productive ways of relating to each other. And I have always been impressed by the difference between people organizing versus government and the relationship between governments. So I make a big distinction about that. Having said that, I've spent a lot of time working with and for government to carry out different causes. But my real love is in the non-governmental sector, where I do a lot of work in philanthropy and organizing, institution building, that sort of thing. And I find that transcends cultures, geography, and so on.
What you will say to policymakers that maybe are listening to this podcast about how they can improve community well-being, or also to individuals like citizens that maybe they are just have jobs that maybe are not related to any of this, but they also would like to contribute to that. How do you think from your experience is this a step?
You have to be willing to listen to the people. Remember, the people in democracies, people have voted these persons into office. to carry out particular missions, purposes, and so on. So you do have to listen to the people. The problem is politicians get into positions of power where they feel they don't have to be responsive or accountable or transparent in their activities. And I think, again, that's something that transcends every culture. But the first thing is to listen to what the people actually want and need, because in the end, they are paying for it. You are paying for it with your tax dollars. I pay for it with my tax dollars.
Are there any red lines that we have to listen to people, but are there any limits to that? Or do you think that in general, people always at the end always want the same, and so at the end it's not?
In terms of democratic societies, democracy is very unruly because you have groups with different priorities, different interests, competing groups. One wants you to go left, the other wants you to go right, the other sounds center, and God knows where other people want you to go. So you need a focus, a commitment to achieving certain things, but it has to be on the advancement of society itself, whether it's new infrastructure, new programs, services, activities, whatever it is that supports the growth of the society itself.
Totally.
We were talking earlier about economic instability in societies and inflation. That's something that's squarely a responsibility of the central government to control. Local governments don't control that. People don't control that. That is the responsibility of governments, which print the money. And the more money they put into the economy, the higher the inflation.
Totally. Which brings me to the next question. That is, your work helped build bridges between social work, public policy, and quality of life research. Why it is so important that the quality of life scholarship remain connected to the real world development and social justice efforts?
I would say because the reality of life is they are connected. The unreality is we've divided things into these separate silos. We've created this division academically. But in real life, you're dealing with all sectors of society, as you can, whether it's transportation or eating, a hotel, a place to sleep. Everything's connected to each other. In natural life, it's only in institutional life that we've created these.
Maybe so this is something that the politicians should try to...
I don't think they can do that. I think academics can exert.
So it's mainly a task of academics.
Early on, when we created the Society for Quality of Life, interdisciplinary research was frowned upon. You were an economist, a psychologist, a social worker, whatever your particular field of study is. That's it. And the idea of talking to people, let alone working with people in other disciplines, was not given any credit. It was something like you do on your own time, but it isn't something that universities themselves supported. That is totally different today.
Thanks to ISQOLS in part, no? I think.
In part, but many organizations came to the same conclusion, particularly in the sciences, because they realized to do something in the laboratory required many different specialties, or in medicine, let's say. Requires physics and understanding of physics and chemistry and pharmaceuticals and all kinds of stuff in order for that particular area to work. You can't just have a narrow vision of it. So intersectoral, interdisciplinary, international are the three hallmarks that I represent.
I remember,
and of course, I'm global.
Yes, totally. I remember this painting of Raffaello, the Renaissance artist, about the School of Athens, where you can see all the different philosophers from different schools of thinking all together in the school. And from that, this was so beautiful and so inspiring that I think that is what we should aim to do as academics that will focus on quality.
The dialogues are questions. They weren't answers.
Like Socratic.
That's right. If you could frame a question appropriately, that was a great advancement. You didn't need the answer then. Everybody will find their own answer.
Yes, that's amazing. So I think that precisely ISQOLS it's trying to do that by presenting work that is very interdisciplinary, and then you receive feedback. But not only it's questions from people from other...
It's not a cookie cutter approach for every society. We're not trying to homogenize the world.
Yes.
We bring people together, we talk about ideas, you walk away with a different understanding, a little more nuance.
Which brings me to another question that actually was the last one, but I ask it to you now.
It's fine.
Given, well, you know that we have this lecture found in your honor, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. By the way, which I had nothing to do with establishing. I was in China when that decision was taken.
Amazing. In China. So, no, I wanted to ask you what gives you hope about the future of this field, now that it's very interdisciplinary and with all the challenges that we are seeing in the world, these political tensions, migration tensions, so on and so forth. What gives you hope about the future of this field? And what would you most want the next generation of scholars to focus on?
Well, of course, the interdisciplinary piece that we were just talking about is very critical. I do think we're in for a very difficult near term, given the political situation.
Yes.
And some governments are fairly reckless in the way they're pursuing problems. And not just one, but a number of governments are really quite reckless in how they're pursuing it. But you have others that are very clearly focused on the future and bringing their society. I'll give you an example. With China, 1,400 million people in China, president for life. They have the Supreme Council and then other councils under them, but they are very clear on what it is they're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. Now, 13% economic growth for a long period of time was pretty good for them. Now it's down to around 4 or 5% economic growth, which many advanced societies envy very much. But still, they have such a large population to take care of. But they have a vision and a sense of what it is they're trying to achieve as a collective.
Yeah. Which now a lot of governments in the world are starting to look beyond GDP. You know, they are, for instance, the government of Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, I remember, or the government of Sanna Marin in Finland. They are trying that this common goal is to improve really the well-being and not the macroeconomic indicators. And I think that there is step by step, people is starting, policymakers, but also citizens to demand, no?
I would say not quickly enough.
Not quickly, but maybe the pandemic helped, no? Like with the, for instance, social phenomena like the Great Resignation or the quiet quitting, people is starting to prioritize more.
The United Nations has every 10 years a new development decade. Mm-hmm. I joined the UN group for the first development decade 50 years ago.
50 years.
And the first 10-year project was focused on economic development.
Yes.
The idea was if you put more money in people's pocket,
yes,
then their quality of life, their state of life, of well-being would improve.
Yes.
Well, we learned that was not the truth. It was not true, because you had very rich countries with many poor people. In my country, 1/5 of the population is poor, with all the money in the world you want.
Yes.
Other societies, still people sleep on the streets. They don't have access to food. Some countries, I understand, you can enter the country and not have any currency. Once you're there, you can't get food, and some go hungry. So I've been told. Anyway, the first development decade, which was focused on enhancing GDP in countries, failed miserably.
Well,
that's when I came aboard at the end of that to make an assessment of why and how we could improve the second development decade. And what I found almost immediately is there were very few social indicators. When you go to the World Bank or to the UN statistical offices, it's all economics
only.
So I had no knowledge
of
God. What it was like on the ground in terms of health, education, those sorts of things.
Oh, but now
life expectation was there.
Yes.
But how do you plan if you don't have information?
Of course, you have to measure the right thing to do the good to know where you're going. But first, you need to measure the right thing.
That's right.
Stiglitz also used to talk about that.
So my approach, my contribution in the early years was to create a statistical model that incorporated more statistics, which meant creating social indicators
Wow.
with the UN and creating a whole new way of collecting information, what it is that you asked of countries. And we were very successful in doing that.
Impressive.
And I created a model that was at that point called the Index of National Social Vulnerability, which had to do with weaknesses. Subsequently, it was changed to Index of Social Progress to make it positive rather than negative.
Than negative, of course.
But we had more data then. We actually requested, request, you only request, you can't require governments to provide more social data. And we could do that. I did the same thing in China.
And how did you convince them that this was the right thing to do?
Well, because we put billions of dollars into the first development decade, which failed.
Okay,
Didn't achieve its goals. So where do we go from here?
Yes.
So the second development decade focused more on social goals, participation, level of living, the ability to have access to health care, rural development, advancing the status of women, protecting children. The whole focus changed to humanitarian outcomes.
Two related questions. First, do you think that if we look now, the progress made in the last 50 years, the world now is a better place, even if now a lot of people think that it's not the case?
I think it's a much better place.
Much better place.
I will tell you, first of all, 60% of university students are women, uniformly. I'm sure it's true in Europe. I know it's true in the U.S.
Totally.
And I know it's true where you and I are meeting today in Argentina. I know that's absolutely true, but I suspect it's true in Europe as well. The men go to the workplace, the women are going to education. This itself is going to create big problems for the society.
Yeah.
Because women, as they search for partners, will have to look down and find people who are not equal with them. And of course, it will have an impact directly on family life, choices of having children or not. And in Europe, you see the fertility rate going down very dramatically. Some countries having as few as 0.7 children as a family. I know it's not, but statistically, the averages are quite low. Even in countries that have pro-natalist policies, the number of children are quite low. My grandmother was one of 13 children.
Oh my God.
My mother was one of 6. I'm one of 6. I've had 4, but my children have 2 each. And their children will probably have 1 or 0.
Or 0. 0.7, no, as you said.
0.7.
My grandmother, I think, she also had 12 brothers and sisters.
12.
Of course.
That was the nature of the time.
Yes, she was
because you
born in
knew you would
19.
lose
Yes.
a substantial number of them before they reached adulthood.
Exactly. But in any case, I think it's clear that we are much better, even if some people
The
say
quality
that,
of our lives are much. We're in a private university in Argentina, beautiful building, beautiful equipment, all the technology you could want in the world. Argentina is still the upper part of the developing country.
Yeah.
And if you generalize that across the board, you can imagine the level of development. And of course, the human part, the access, the advancement that comes with that.
Totally.
Better economy, but with lots of hiccups, lots of difficulties. But there are always going to be difficulties, unless we live in the world of Star Trek. We do away with the economy. Whatever you need is provided. Just go to the machine and say, a cup of tea, please. And it's going to ask you what temperature.
Yeah, today we're talking about that with Alita, that is also here with us.
Oh, she.
Yes.
Oh, she.
Which brings me to the next question, which is related to what you were saying about the social indicators research. You were among the pioneers of comparative social indicators research. What do you think that are the greatest strengths that I think that, well, you quite mentioned, but what are the greatest limitations of using social indicators to understand human well-being internationally?
For me, it's the same answer that I gave you about interdisciplinary. If you're looking only at your own city, your own province, your own country, you miss out on all the rest of the world.
Totally.
And there's more in common with the rest of the world. You can see patterns and processes. You learn what worked, what didn't work in other societies. You have all the advantages that are associated with being able to see your neighbor. But if you're just looking down at this little data set, you miss all that.
Which I also think that brings us to another question. I think that even if a lot of us come from different disciplines of social sciences, there is a great division between those who only use quantitative research and those who only use qualitative. And I think that it's time that we also try to merge them, because to understand a lot of mechanisms that we only see with quantitative, you need qualitative.
This is true for ISQOLS too. ISQOLS in the beginning was divided between two groups. The economic folks, and a lot of the early pioneers were economists, and the psychologists. And so the fight was always over subjective versus objective. Well, I happen to be more objective in terms of my data, but my analyses is more subjective and more prescriptive about how to change things. Many researchers are interested in collecting data just to collect data and report their findings. My mission has been totally different. I want data to be used for a positive purpose. I want to influence policy. And everything I've spoken to you about has to do with how one can use information to influence decision makers and so on. My feeling is that information without action, which is typical research, is immoral.
Totally.
On the other hand, to have action without information,
it's also
silly.
Silly.
Because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know so you have to bring them together.
Which brings me also to the reflection that maybe we should also give citizens access to all this information in order that they can choose better policy makers that are aligned with their goals. Because a lot of times we only give the information to the policymakers, but the population doesn't really know what is going on, which I think that nowadays with the social media, for instance, in ISQOLS, we created some social media platforms like in Instagram, for instance, but our main goal is precisely to disseminate a lot of the information that we can have.
This is why in my books, I always publish an appendix with all the raw data that I've collected. I have a 50-year data set of original data that goes back to 1970. And I've been building and changing since 1970.
Wow.
And the appendix contains information for each country, and I follow 190 countries now.
Oh my God.
And they have the data for each of the decades and the percent changes, so you can see what actually has taken place within each country. So that's totally transparent, and it's free.
Wow.
Nobody has to buy it.
That's, wow. That's impressive. And we are finishing, Richard, so I have two last questions.
Okay.
First is like across your extensive international engagement from Asia to Middle East to Europe and Latin America, what have you learned about the diversity or the diversity of pathways through which societies support or undermine quality of life across all these? At the beginning of this podcast, you were telling me about the commonality, no? But
what I have found is there is an enormous community of like-minded people whose goal is really to improve the human condition. You're from Europe, I'm from North America, here we are in South America. Our goal is exactly the same.
It's the same.
And we have more than 100 people attending this conference, all working toward the same objective.
Totally.
So that's been a very important lesson. There's almost anywhere in the world I can go, I will find a cadre, a group of people who are like-minded and are willing to work together, be cooperative. A lot of my books are co-authored by people in other countries, totally different background. I've got a couple of books on Islam. On Islam.
Wow.
And just remarkable, totally different perspectives.
Impressive. And
Islam's given us a lot.
A lot, yeah.
While Europe slept, the Arab countries were hard at work in science and humanities.
I remember, I am from Spain, and I remember the lessons in astronomy, in science, in literature.
Even the number zero.
The number zero, yeah. And other, also in food, in terms of food, by the way.
Great food.
So, Richard, the last question that I want to ask you is: when you reflect on your whole career, what do you think that is your lasting contribution? Which has been your most important contribution?
I think my role as a professor and passing on my enthusiasm to new generations of students has been a very important contribution that I make, because I'm very blessed. I have many generations of students whose lives I've affected and careers I've affected, many of whom are in very important places.
Wow.
So I think that is the lasting contribution. It's not mine. It's what I give to others who are in positions to make decisions.
Is it important to live with enthusiasm? The art of living has to be always with enthusiasm.
And I have that.
I can see that. I can see that. Richard, a pleasure.
My friend, I thank you so much.
Thank you.